Good morning. I hope you all are doing well. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I am giving everyone a virtual hug. We are here still in Kissimmee, Florida, but we are glad that you all are home and are safe and are, joining us in this moment. We, as you know, had to transition to a virtual format. So we're going to ask for a little grace this morning as we walk through all of this. But just thank you so much for your commitment to this work. Thank you so much for being in space with us this morning. And I'm going to take the liberty to ask you all to keep those in Florida lifted in prayer as we move through the storm that is hitting Tallahassee and other parts of the Panhandle in the Gulf Coast, Florida. And as it travels up the coast, we're hoping that it will dissipate and calm, but then just pray that everyone stays safe. And so we have a huge, wonderful program planned for you all today. And I wanted to give us a few minutes to just check in the chat. I have a few announcements to make in a little bit, but I want you all to, in the chat, to say your name, your organization, your pronouns. Please use the chat to stay connected to all that are in space with us today. And if you have questions or concerns, place those in the chat as well. I'm going to ask that you all please, just a couple of housekeeping things. Mute yourselves so that we do not get the background as folks having to take care of themselves and do the things that we need to do while we are in our homes or in our spaces to keep us safe. Take care of yourself throughout this convening. Your safety, of course, comes first. Your needs for your body come first. So please make sure you're being mindful of that. But unless we ask to unmute, if you just please make sure your sounds are muted so that we can hear those that are presenting and giving us space this morning. I am going to take a few seconds to introduce Chev. Chev is here with us this morning, and he's going to give us the lay of the ground of what's going on in Florida that you all need to be mindful of, that you all need to put some money down for, all the things. So Chev, thank you so much this morning. If you can, please just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your work, and then set the tone for us around what's happening in Florida.
Tamika, I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm coming from you in Florida as well. I was telling for folks earlier, I'm at my mother-in-law's house because my power is out due to the storm. But thank you, Tamika, and thank you to Grantmakers for Southern Progress, especially Amber and Elizabeth, with whom we've been working for some time to make sure you're welcome, those attending the conference, and to our state begins with a highlight of our Florida movement ecosystem. We had a terrific panel of my colleagues from Florida Rising planned today, and some of our partners across the state prepared. However, as Tamika said, our plans are not always aligned with God's plans. And as you all know too well, a hurricane strengthened by historically warm seawaters, and actually I want to say that a little differently, a hurricane that's strengthened by how unregulated agriculture and unchecked corporate polluters have warmed our seawaters, is battering our state as we speak. This is when our souls are already feeling battered by being the latest in a too frequent string of locations where Black people, my people, are forced to mourn our dead, explain the unexplainable to our children, and deal with one more violent racist who, like our governor, wants our history and our vote. They want to see us erased from the earth. So it's with grace that I thank the conveners for both relieving our panelists from their duties so that they can fortify their homes physically and continue the work of fortifying our communities spiritually, politically, and collectively. And for still providing me this space to welcome you all, even if virtually, to such a misrepresented and misunderstood state. And of course, we want to invite you back anytime next year If you want to knock on doors, if you want to raise some hell, or if you want to register some voters with us, like our good friends like Jasmine Burnett, Equal Ground. So I want to introduce myself first. My name is Chevalier Lovett. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. I proudly serve as the Chief Operating Officer for Florida Rising, the largest Black and Brown civic engagement and issue-based organizing group in our state. We are a result of a merger of two powerhouse organizations you all may be familiar with: New Florida Majority, that held down the organizing in the South and North parts of the state, and Organized Florida, which was my home organization, where I served as the Senior Vice President and Managing Director. And we worked in the central part of the state along the I-4 corridor and got married in 2021 to become Florida Rising. Together, we are dedicated to defeating the trifecta of Republican rule that we have suffered under the past 20 plus years, because Florida, like the rest of the South, is not a deep red state. We are a state of 50% women. 1 in 5 of us are immigrants, a state that recognized LGBTQIA plus marriages before it was the law of the nation. We are more than 8 million voters strong. And we are a progressive state being held hostage by a governor and a party that is terrified of what would happen to their corporate donors' interests if the majority were actually allowed to rule. Florida is a state that is ashamed, quite honestly, to be the home to DeSantis's attempted rise. However, we are also the state of Representative Angie Nixon, who glared him down with the most powerful of powerful Black woman glares when he dared showed his face at the Jacksonville Vigil this past weekend. And we are a state in the South. We were the first state in the South to pass the $15 minimum wage. We are the place that saw the largest re-enfranchisement of voters since Reconstruction, that fought to reinstate the voting rights of 1.4 million returning citizens and former felons. We are the state that sent the first Gen Z congressperson, Maxwell Frost, to Washington. So if you are visiting Florida this morning with a national lens, you primarily see us as 29 electoral college votes. But if you're visiting Florida from other southern states, then you too are probably used to being written off the map by national pundits. And if you are visiting from North Carolina or Texas or Georgia, shout out to those states, then you too are coming from a place to a place where there is organizing that has us on the verge of something new. So the truth is that we have to battle more than just the right-wing fascism we are all familiar with from our governor. We also have to battle the cynicism about government and civic engagement that has taken deep root in our communities. We could diagnose why that is for days. I'm sure throughout the conference, we're going to unpack a ton of that. However, I want to talk about prescription for a second. Had we been in person together, you would have done a learning tour of Central Florida given by my colleague and friend at Hope Community Center, Felipe Sousa Lazabalette. I would have shared the actual stage with Naila Summers, the co-executive director of Dream Defenders, a group born out of the murder of Trayvon Martin, and who is continuing to build an unapologetic force for Black youth liberation in our state. We would have sat alongside Tessa Petit, the executive director of Florida Immigrant Coalition, who would have shared with you the contours and the nuances of Florida's immigrant community that is Venezuelan and Bahamian and Caribbean and Colombian and Haitian Creole, and way more diverse and complicated than other locations. I would have gotten to introduce to you my colleagues, my sisters, my inspirations, Monet Holder and Sheena Roll from Florida Rising. And most importantly, we would have gotten to share with you a small glimpse of what it looks like to build together across organizations alongside partners in our Florida for All coalition, like Jobs with Justice, Faith in Florida, and SEIU, a multi-generational, multiracial coalition that learned a very long time ago that to fight for issues without contending in elections is to make DJ requests without ever looking at who's writing a songbook. And to contend in elections without fighting for the issues most important to our communities is to sell people a meal they all know has been sitting out for too long. Everyone may be hungry, but sometimes hunger is better than indigestion. And as I get older, I understand that a little bit more. We deserve more than all of that, and we are putting together the recipe to get it. So when Hurricane Idalia clears, Floridians will be left to pick up the pieces. It will be low-income renters who lose their right to return to their apartments before landlords jack the prices in cities that the GOP banned from passing local rent controls. It will be immigrant workers the governor would like to see deported who will most likely rebuild our state. And it will be the Black and brown residents near our biggest polluters, like the Doral incinerator in Miami, who will watch as lack of regulation makes the next storm all the more likely and all the more devastating. Abandoned by 20 plus years of deregulation, it will be homeowners who find that they can't get insurance and may be forced to sell, exacerbating the wave of displacement, first by the storm, second by speculators. Florida organizations are working together to address all of those issues at once because none of us live single issue lives. We are working to build political power, to build the right people in office to provide solutions for Floridians instead for Florida corporations. That's why in 2024, we will not only be backing candidates who support justice on every block. We will not only be registering a record number of voters in the state, we will also be following the example of Kansas and Kentucky and Ohio, and we will be putting abortion on the ballot because when the conservatives think they can put their reach onto the bodies of women and people who give birth, the majority of Floridians will make it clear that they are overreaching. When they ban our history, they are overreaching. When they erase our voting districts, they are overreaching. When they have done us the favor of showing their true colors, they are overreaching. So it would be comical if it was not also very dangerous for us. Dangerous for our democracy, dangerous for our communities, dangerous for our minds, dangerous for our loved ones and our physical bodies. If you all have been following the news, you'll understand me when I say that once our recent tragedies became our recent history, let's say 10 years from now, DeSantis will want it to be taught to our school children that the benefit of racist shootings is that survivors learned the skill of how to duck and cover. And let that settle in for a second. And as a father of twins, I don't want that bullshit rhetoric taught to my children. However, 10 years from now, if we have our way, which we will, he and the white supremacists who support him will have about as much power to do that as a gas station attendant, because no one knows better than Floridians that after a storm comes another sunny day. So I want to thank you all for not allowing the storm to prevent you from continuing to gather for Southern progress. Thank you for the grace. Thank you for the time you have allowed me to welcome you and give a Florida platform and talk about the issues that's important to Florida. We, and I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues across the state that's doing this movement work, we welcome you to Florida, virtually as it is right now. And also on behalf of my co-panelists, we invite you, once the clouds clear, to be a part of the cleanup effort. Thank you all. Thank you, Tamika.
Thank you so much for your words and for setting the tone and grounding us in what's real. I hope that each of you take his words and put them into action. Like, this is why we are here. This is how we need to show up for folk in movement that are working hard to make sure people in community have what they need, not only to be safe, but to thrive and to create and realize the visions that they've created for their families and for their own communities. So please, you all, heed the words that will be shared. Chev, you are doing amazing work, and I wish you were here right now. I would just grab you like your grandmama used to grab you. So thank you all so much. I also want to give us an opportunity to ground ourselves in where we are. It is important for us to understand the land that we are standing on and the people that have been fighting to make this land home for years and for centuries. So we are blessed to have with us Ms. Nathiri. Ms. Nathiri is here to share some background and to ground us in the place and the people whose feet we have walked this land first. So she's going to tell us a little bit about Eatonville. Eatonville is the first established township, Black township in the US, not just in Florida, but in the US. And Ms. Nathiri is here to ground us this morning and let us know some of that history around who we are in the state of Florida. Ms. Nathiri, I turn it over to you.
I was born in a Negro town. I do not mean by that the black backside of an average town. Eatonville, Florida is and was at the time of my birth a pure Negro town. Mayor, town marshal, charter, and all. It was not the first Negro community in America, but it was the first to be incorporated, the first experiment by Negroes in America for self-government. Those are the words of Zora Neale Hurston, the writer, the anthropologist, the folklorist, born in 1891, died in 1960, a woman who is a charismatic figure, who is a masterful storyteller, and a woman who has made Eatonville, Florida, a literary destination amongst the reading public. She is a global icon. That having been said, however, Eatonville has been really under assault, I would say, for the last 50 years. If you look at each decade, you will see a systematic effort to try to destroy the historic character of the town and to destroy the town itself. And why is that? That is because Eatonville still is the largest undeveloped parcel of land in Orange County. We sit at that famous or infamous I-4 corridor. We are about 10 miles northeast of downtown Orlando, about 30 minutes from Kissimmee, Florida. We are sitting on hallowed ground. Now, the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community, founded in 1987, is just the most recent iteration of the civic pride of the people of Eatonville. In fact, Eatonville rests on 4 foundational pieces: faith, family, education, and civic pride. And so I want you to understand, as I'm talking about what we're doing at Preserve Eatonville Community, that we are not an outlier. We are simply an extension of what has been the tradition of a vibrant community, proud of its heritage and not willing to let anyone take it away. Understanding that in the early 1900s, Ocoee, which is also in Orange County, that the people, the Black people in Ocoee, were killed and chased out. So we want to have a kind of context. And I invite you, please, to visit preserveeatonville.org, www.preserveeatonville.org, to find out more about us. We do a podcast. We do a lot of different things, and I'm so grateful to have been invited to participate in this panel, because it is actually the case that too often those of us in the South, in the rural South particularly, are forgotten about within the halls of philanthropy. For us, and I want to very quickly invite you all to come back, to come to Eatonville January 26 through 28 of 2024, because Eatonville for us represents a 21st century case study of how communities known as low socioeconomic, but who are rich in culture, heritage, and historical resources, how we can actually be a part of, quote unquote, the American dream. Eatonville sits in Orange County, Florida, one of the global destinations for tourism, all right? Cultural heritage tourism, and that is that cohort, that niche industry that represents the people who are lifelong learners, who are interested in an authentic experience, who actually visit museums, they go to places where there are authentic experiences. That's where Eatonville is. And the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community has, for 35 years now, presented the annual Zora Neale Hurston Festival of the Arts and Humanities. We call it Zora Festival. So for us, as the gentleman said, Florida represents a kind of historical schizophrenia, right? We can really understand why people will not want to come and spend their money in the Florida of the current administration in Tallahassee. We understand that. However, in Eatonville, you have a chance to invest your dollars in the community where people who look like you, who think like you, who are sympathetic to the same kind of issues, and you will have a very good time, because if you're spending your money, it's not for a cause necessarily. You want fine customer service, and I want to assure you that we are masochistic when it comes to customer service. In fact, the Zora Festival is now known as America's longest running Arts and Humanities Festival, celebrating the cultural contributions of people of African ancestry throughout the African diaspora. So for us, on a day-to-day basis, who we are, what we represent, and the wonder of our heritage and our culture, we are anxious and love to share that. And of course, the wonderful thing is that because we are meeting the marketplace, and when I talk about the marketplace, I'm speaking about cultural heritage tourism. We already know that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, niche industry, that cultural heritage tourists, they come repeatedly to the same place. They stay a half a day longer than the tourists who go to the attractions, and they spend more money. So when you talk about preservation, and I think as I complete my comments, what I would like to leave with you is this: no matter where your community is, no matter your background, as long as you know your story, and this is where we really are very much settled and entrenched, it's so important to know your story, to know the history, to know the facts of your story. And as long as you enjoy working with people, as long as you enjoy being able to have people be with you, that you have a way of meeting the marketplace, whether you live in a place known as a barrio, whether you live on quote unquote a reservation, no matter where you live, as long as you know your story, know how to tell your story, and you enjoy working with people, there is an economic niche for your community to prosper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nathiri. I really appreciate you bringing us to Eatonville this morning. I had the opportunity to explore your town, and it was beautiful. It was grounded. I love they have a museum that's dedicated to Ms. Zora Neale Hurston. So I encourage you all not only to go and visit, but to spend time in Eatonville, understand their story, because their story is our story. And we need to support the work that is happening in the development of that, the continued development in Eatonville. So Ms. Nathiri, thank you so much for blessing us this morning and allowing us to spend some time in Eatonville. I also want to take an opportunity to make a couple of more announcements that I failed to mention. One is that closed captioning is available. If you look down on the bottom of your screen, if you click on more, if you don't see it in the bar, click on more and the captions are there. And if you're having trouble accessing the caption, please private chat Elizabeth, who will be able to give you further instructions. I also want to do, this work that we're doing is only possible by those who have been supporting GSP, not only with financial resources, but just care and dedication to making sure the GSP has what it needs to continue to fight and make sure investments are being invested in the Southern region. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to shout out some of our biggest sponsors for this convening. The Foundation for Just Society, Paulina has been amazing. The W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Sakina, who also sits on GSP Steering Committee, has been rocking it for us for a long time. And the Democracies Fund, who said, what do you need? We got you. And so I just am so appreciative to all of our sponsors. If you want to check out the other sponsors of GSP, we have them in our program booklets and our swag bags. We can only do the work that we're doing because of the investments that you all are putting into us so that we can continue to invest into the communities across this region. So we thank you so much for supporting us and being here for us. I'd also like to introduce another steering committee member, Ms. Tiambe Barnes. Ms. Tiambe is going to be here throughout the convening with you all, and she's going to be our convening guide. Tiambe is a child of the South, as am I. And she works with an institution that has been around for 20 plus years, investing in rural organizations across the state, across the South. So please allow me to welcome Ms. Tiambe Barnes. Tiambe, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your flexibility. And thank you for being able to help us carry this convening through. And I'm waiting for them to pin Tiambe now. There she goes. Look at that beautiful face, Tiambe. So Tiambe, I will turn it over to you to allow you to welcome folks to the South in only the way that Tiambe does. And then we will continue with our programming.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am Tiambe Barnes, or you can call me T, and I'm program coordinator at Southern Partners Fund. And I hail from Sweet Home, Alabama, right here in Prattville, right next door to Montgomery, home of the newfound, you know how we are. We went viral not too long ago, but that's okay. I am, so happy to be here. I wish I was down there, and I wish we were all together because we needed to be together. But, as Chef said, God makes a way, and we're going to make the best of what we're doing right here because the South has something to say, and we're going to say it right here on this Zoom. So I welcome you all and thank you for the opportunity to be with you all this afternoon. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. Please engage with other people. There are meetups happening because just because we're not there does not mean we still can't fellowship, because that's what this work is about, is being together. And so I'm very happy here to be there. Somebody said Alabama is in here. The folding chair has arrived. All right. I love it. See, I didn't want to bring that into the space, but since y'all did, okay, y'all did it. So without further ado, I want to introduce Chantel Fisher-Byrne for the Philanthropic Organizing the South Plenary. This is going to be a really good space because as we've already heard that there's so many things going on in the South. We have constant battles. Oh my goodness, we have constant battles for our elections, for our housing, for our water crisis. We have everything, and if you name it, from environmental justice issues. So it is time that we talk about philanthropic organizing in the South. So without further ado, Chantel.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Well, good morning to all of you. I'm going to ask too that we pin my friends Melanie and Karima up here with me. And also, we are going to just be inviting y'all to listen in on a porch sitting conversation. We are here on the Zoom. We were hoping to be in person in Florida, and we cannot. And we're going to do what we've been doing, which is Zoom it together. So appreciate the flexibility and the grace as we as we are moving in real time and making things work as we go. So I think, Melanie, you're going to kick us off and then we're going to move forward.
Thank you, Chantel and Tiambe, and hello to each and every one of you. My name is Melanie Allen. I'm one of the founding co-directors of the High Fund for Climate and Gender Justice, and have the great honor of being one of the co-chairs of GSP's steering committee. And as we begin this session, we just wanted to take a moment to ground. And so I'm going to invite you to whatever is comfortable for you, camera on or camera off. Just take a moment and be present with yourself. Take stock of your breath. Pay attention to the rhythm. What is your body doing? And sitting, standing, wherever you are, just take maybe 2 or 3 seconds to get 10% more comfortable. So if that means stretching your legs out, if your shoulders are high and tight, put some attention to letting them rest, letting your arms hang down. What's your jaw doing? Do you need to unclench? And I'm just going to invite you all into breath with me. I'm going to invite you all to take a deep, deep breath. We're going to inhale for 4. We're going to hold it at the top. And if you want to come off mute, I invite you to. And we're going to exhale. And whether you're on mute or off mute, I'd love to hear your exhale. So inhale for 4. I'm going to count us at the top. And then a mighty exhale. All right? All right. Deep breath in. 2, 3, 4. Gonna hold it. Feel that expansion of your lungs. And release. Gonna do it again. Deep breath in. 2, 3, 4. Hold it here at the top. And exhale. We're going to do one more on this last breath. I want you to be really intentional. When we're inhaling, just think about everything it is that you want to bring with you to this space, to this conversation, to our time together the rest of the week, even though we're virtual. And as you exhale, I want you to release anything that's vying for your attention that you don't want to intentionally bring with us into this space. All right. Deep intentional breath in. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold on to those intentions here at the top. And release. And we'll just take a couple more moments for folks to settle into yourselves, get comfortable, and we're going to settle here into our virtual porch as we prepare for our conversation. And I'll kick it back to you, Chantel.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody again. So my name is Chantel Fisher-Bourne. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a consultant with Grantmakers for Sudden Progress. Many of you know me in my former role with Funders for LGBTQ Issues with the Out in the South initiative, and shout out to funders and all the good work they're doing. And I'm here in Durham, North Carolina, zooming in. My 16-year-old or 15-year-old is very sad that I'm not wearing actual real dress pants today. She was excited for my work week to be different, but yet here I am again, and I'm in sweatpants. I also grew up in a small town in southern Louisiana, and my family is still there. And my heart goes out to folks who are navigating the hurricane today and will be for many, many weeks and months in the future. And I think it is difficult to know that that's happening, and we're here on a Zoom, and also really relates to the work. And I think the work of GSP has been really a place where I found a network of people who are really grounded in the realities of Southern movement work, and how we can really be honest, how we can support authentic and real work that's building the type of world that we all deserve. So I'm going to ask my other 2 folks here on our very comfortable Zoom porch to introduce themselves, and then we'll offer some frameworks and some questions for you to consider as really an invitation to the time we have together over the next couple days and really, how we can build this platform that we have at GSP in a way that really helps us to problem solve together. These times are not easy, and we are constantly navigating crises after crises, and we know this. And we also know this work isn't going to be answered or solved in 18 months, much less like a 5-year strategic plan. And so those of us who have found the GSP network to be helpful in our work are just excited to invite more of us in and go a little deeper and be real about what our communities need from us in the next decades. So Karima, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll hand it over to Melanie to say a little more about her work.
Thanks so much, Chantel. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I want to give the folk at GSP a virtual round of applause for the pivot you all did in a very short time frame. Great job, great job. So the storm is coming through. It's going to come through at any minute, but I'm going to be here until it tells me I can't be here. So I'm really happy to be here with you all today. I'm Karima Nanyameko, she, her pronouns. I'm in Summerville, South Carolina, which is about 20 miles west of my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. I am a Gullah woman that was grounded in the Gullah community in Charleston, South Carolina. The land is Kusu land. I work for Heisey Simons Foundation as a program officer. I focus on capacity building across the human rights team that's led by Angie Young. We have a wonderful new CEO, Shishma. She and I had a great conversation yesterday just about the direction of the foundation. And one of the questions that I'll answer later about how do you show up as women of color, as people of color in this foundation and in this culture that we find ourselves in. So I'll talk more about that later, but that's who I am, and I'm sticking to it, and I'm going to pass it to Melanie.
Thanks so much, Karima. Again, I'm Melanie Allen. I use her pronouns. I'm excited to be on a very heavy Carolina panel this morning. I'm also joining from Durham, North Carolina. Greensboro, North Carolina is my hometown. And just honored to be here with you all. As I mentioned before, I, along with my co-director here, Aaron Rogers, run the High Fund for Climate and Gender Justice, which is a re-granting intermediary we fund here in the U.S. South. And I feel like it's important to the story of GSP because I think as an intermediary, GSP has been one of the places where we've been able to find a home and be in conversation with other folks who are in the messy middle with us, both raising money, but also making grants, and then also a relationship with grantee partners. The other thing that I just want to name as we head into this conversation is, our hearts and minds are with everyone in Florida who's bracing and already dealing with this storm. I'm also just sitting heavily with this week as the 18th anniversary of Katrina, the 2nd anniversary of Ida, and what we know as Southern people, that the storms are getting bigger, the storms are coming faster, and these 100-year, 500-year storms are now indeed the norm. And so, just sitting in the beauty and resilience, but also the fearless and I think never-ending determination of Southern people, not only to survive and care for one another in times of storm, but also to get at the roots, which feels like such the important work that GSP is always orienting us toward. And I'll pass it back to you, Chantel, to give us our framework.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the porch, y'all. And so I wanted to offer up some ideas that, along with the GSP team, we just want to share a little bit about the approach to this work and the posture that we feel like those of us who are part of the GSP network are really committed to practicing together. And I wanted to share just some of these commitments that we have that are big words, and then we'll get into some of the actually, what does it look like and feel like to do this work? I think just to be clear, we're committed to organizing philanthropy in a way that moves resources in alignment with the needs and vision of Southern movement work. This isn't new. You've heard this before. This platform is a unique platform in the world of philanthropy, particularly as it relates to Southern communities. We're committed to moving resources in a way that builds a healthy ecosystem of groups and organizations throughout the region that are connected to generations-long lineages of liberatory Southern movement work rooted in communities of color. That's also a lot of words. Also saying that we know that this work is not new, that this work in the South has been happening for generations. And how do we not do what philanthropy often does, is this sort of like, almost like a Columbusing of Southern work, a romanticization of Southern work, and sometimes even a fetishizing of Southern work. And how do we be real about what it means to be a student and part of and coming from this work? My very queer creative family is a result and possible because of Southern movement work. I'm very clear about that. I come from rural people in Southern Louisiana, Cajun culture, people who know how to take care of one another, and who also struggle with a plantation economy that's real and a very not even recent history in Israel today. So being real about the lineages that we come from. We're committed to interrupting practices in philanthropy that create dysfunction amongst movement organizations and play a part in actually disrupting the work we so desperately need. This is important to say out loud, to be really clear about it, that we know we're working in a field that has done a lot of harm. And what does it mean to be real about how we can play our roles really well, how we can learn what we need to learn in our seats, and strategize along with movement organizations about how we get the resources that folks really need. And in a different way, to be more specific, we're committed to accompany movement groups and organizations in their work toward building political power among communities of color, immigrants, queer and trans people, and other marginalized groups in Southern communities. Just being more explicit about this, this isn't about maintaining status quo work. The reflections we just heard about Florida, we know that the current state in Southern places is not a reflection of the people. Southern states are being controlled by state houses that have no interest in supporting the communities that we're part of, and are part of legacies of white supremacist violence in these places. And we know that we have work to do to build the kind of political power so the folks that we care about, the communities we care about, can build the world that we all deserve. So these are the explicit commitments that we have as a crew. And we are really trying to be clear about what it really looks like to do this work, because it can be kind of confusing when you're in the role in the funder space and in this orbit, how to be grounded in reality. And so I have on my mind this week, I'm thinking a lot about my kids. I have a 6th grader and a 10th grader, and they started new schools this week. And I'm thinking about what it means to be a parent right now in this world, what it means to be having an 80-year-old mom in a small town in Southern Louisiana who needs a little more help, and just being real about my own family's journey and needs right now. In the vein of supporting being real about kids and schools and appreciating public school teachers, I'm reflecting on, since kindergarten, my kids have been using a framework in the school they're at to reflect on their own selves and their own growth and learning. And they have been challenged to consider how they're growing and learning, to think about their habits of heart, their habits of mind, and their habits of scholarship. And so this is the conversation that I'm hoping to bring to the porch today with Karima and Melanie, for us each to reflect on in our roles, in our work of doing social justice, philanthropy, and service to Southern movement work. What does it mean to be able to, attend to our habits of heart, our habits of mind, and our habits of scholarship? And habits of heart, just to be real, is how you feel. Feelings matter. This work is intense. There's feelings of overwhelm if we're awake to what is happening in the world. There's also a lot of love and joy that we experience. Habits of mind are ideas and frameworks that we bring to this work, assumptions that we have that may or may not serve community. And how do we hold steady to those and actually be in community with people to share them more externally and work with our assumptions and ideas and frameworks? And then habits of scholarship, how do we learn and grow together? Who really knows what we're trying to do? Who really knows what we're up to? Who really knows how we're doing, where we're making mistakes? And how do we build horizontal relationships with folks who are going to help us identify how we can do better? and how we can try out experiments, right? That actually move resources in the way that we know that community is often asking us to. So there you go. That's what we're going to be talking about on the porch here. Some other guiding questions that we asked, just to know in terms of this sort of framework, has been, what does it feel like to practice a leadership style that doesn't mimic traditional white heteronormative patriarchal models? How does this show up in the organizations that we're working with and building? How does it show up in grant making? And how do we accompany movements so they don't fall into the pitfalls of traditional philanthropy? So this is the soup we're swimming in, and we offer these questions for all of you to be considering over the next couple of days. But I will turn it over to Melanie to share some of her insights, and we'll just sort of take some turns and be on the Zoom together, and you can listen in. We'll talk a bit, and then we'll go into some small group conversations where each of you can share your own reflections. So Melanie, over to you.
Thank you. And kind of as we are here on the porch, I'm inviting Chantel and Karima, and I think we'll do this to interject, to hop in so that we'll be more in conversation. But I really appreciate, and I've been laughing ever since Chantel introduced this practice from her children's school, because I love it so much. The habits of heart, habits of wait, what was it? Our second one?
Habits of heart, habits of mind.
Habits of mind, and habits of scholarship. And when I think about GSP, it is in so many ways my introduction to philanthropy. And so I think of it as home. I started at Babcock in April of 2017. I think my second day of the job, I was at a GSP convening in Charleston, South Carolina. And so for me, stepping into a space that I was like, oh, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if philanthropy is where I'm supposed to be. It sounds interesting. It looks like a place where I can, do some good work. But, I was feeling very much like, oh, am I going to be a team of one? Or I met a few people in my organization. So I was like, okay, there's this really small tribe or group of folks who are thinking in the ways that I'm thinking in this space that is literally built from the extraction, from our people, from our communities, from our land, and then I think covered in sugar and candy and making us kind of swallow what they give back to us as if it's a gift, as if it's some sort of benevolence. And I showed up in Charleston, and the conversations that I was having, not just in sessions, but on the bus, breaking bread at the table, let me know, okay, this is a community of folks who are really thinking about, struggling with, grappling with what it means to be in this piece, but also not of it. And so GSP to me has been a home, has been a place that I can come home to be able to grapple with those issues and not have to do it quietly or on the side in my notebook in a sheet of paper seething, but to do it out loud, to do it regularly, to do it as practice. And so when I think of habits of heart, it is like this habit of transparent relationship and, sitting like we're sitting now and being able to say, hey, that doesn't feel or sound quite right to me. What's going on there? Can we unpack it? I was thinking a lot about habits of heart because coming into philanthropy and like reading all I could read around good practice and what it looked like, I'm deeply committed to system change and to changing the places that where we live in durable ways that work for me, that work for people that look like me. And there was almost this pull, when people get like too far on one side, like, okay, there's the work that we're funding, systems change work, and forgetting like the people who may be in deep distress, dire distress today. And it's a place where like, I got to ask these questions like, hey, we're committed to systems change, but what about today? What about people who need to eat today? What about the people who are out in the rain and the storm today? And what does it look like to hold these two things together? And so it was a place to interrupt, I think, a lot of the intellectualization of what it means to be a funder, of what it means to do this work that is durable, of what it means to do this work, to really be in the work and to be in it as a person. And to say that that is okay, that's not only okay, but that's necessary, that taking yourself outside the work as some academic exercise is not serving any of us. I think it often serves to make us feel like we should be in these institutions and serve making us feel as if we're belonging in a way that separates us from the very communities that we say that we're here to serve the very communities, for me, like that I'm still a part of, that I live in and am deeply connected to. And so in GSP, I found a connection. I found folks who were unwilling to falsely sever themselves to be and contort to be in this space from the communities that we're still very much a part of. When I think about what it means to be connected in this community of heart, it has also been, so many times making calls to people that are my colleagues or doing the work that are just like, how you doing? Are you okay? I know that things look really, really hard over there. I'm not in it with you, but I've been in these institutions and we know how they can follow us up whole. It's been about in the space of a high fund where we're a new institution, where I don't have a 20 or 30-year legacy, saying we can be a soft place for people to land. We can hire folks if we know that they're getting eaten up inside their organization, but we can also like throw a contract at someone who's doing incredible work so that they have the space to do what it is that they need to be well, to figure out their next move. And it doesn't have to be wrapped up in this package of philanthropy, like, give me your 20-year plan. Let me know in 5 years how this will impact the field. It is like, we have resources and we can use those in ways that say, hey, what does it take for you to be okay? The other thing I was talking with Tamika about that this morning is just what we see. And I don't know how many people know what's happening behind the scenes right now. But on Monday, having to make the tough decision to call this and to transition to virtual, and knowing that we had hotel rooms, we had food, we had things that were already purchased. And so being in deep relationship, like, can we pick up the phone and call V? We know that Valencia and the Smile Trust do this, that they're always, doing the work, no matter where the disaster hits, no matter what's happening, to make sure that communities are okay. And so picking up the phone and saying, hey, we got hotel rooms. What do you need? We have food. What do you need? And so the team that was supposed to be greeting and welcoming folks in Florida are now oriented towards supporting the folks who are on the ground and making sure that we've got rooms that now people are staying in that are not going to be left empty, but that are going to be receiving families who need to evacuate. When I'm thinking about how that heart connects to this question of like mind, I'm thinking, Chantel, so many of us have been in conversation, particularly over the last 3 to 4 years, around what is this machinery of philanthropy, and particularly in moments like this, like disaster, when they show up, how do we make it move? How do we make it move more quickly? How do we make it so that we don't have to rebuild it each and every time? And I'm looking back 2 years ago at the hurricane, we were trying to figure out, how can we move money quickly enough to get hotel rooms? Can we get people to move money through Cash App? Can we get people to, foundations to throw down in ways that can actually be helpful and not take a week and a half for people who need a place to stay tonight? And then looking at this week, and we're like, okay, the storm is going to hit in 2 days. We have these blocks of hotel rooms that we can set up for folks. And so it's been that like moving of heart, moving of mind, but then also the scholarship. And part of the scholarship for me has been like how we talk and think about the things that didn't work. We're a participatory fund, and so I've been able to be in deep conversation with so many other folks that are participatory. And we thought when we were going to start that we were going to have people reading every single grant, and they told us really quickly, hey, y'all, we got jobs, we got work to do. That is not how we're going to do this thing. And so being able to like learn with other funds that we're trying to figure out what that means, to be participatory, to do decision making, to have it shared, and not to do it in a way that is burdening communities, but in a way that still feels self-determining. And so I think to be able to just really tell that story, but also not to tell it in like, hey, this is what this looks like, to be able to tell it in a way that's asking questions and inviting people to help us as we refine in each step of the journey. Those are kind of just a few of my reflections, particularly I think through the lens of what it's meant to land in GSP and to have it as almost a learning lab for me, but also a deeply held community of folks that I know I can always pick up the phone to call, particularly as we're stepping into this work. And I'm gonna stop talking.
I can jump in, Chantel.
Mhm.
Yeah. So thank you, Melanie, for like actually following the sort of framework that Chantel offered us. I was thinking like, where do I go with this in terms of the habits of the heart, the mind, and scholarship? Because I think that's a great framework. And it's great to hear that your young folk are sort of shaping their school year, thinking about it in this way. I think in terms of habit of the heart, I think, Melanie, I'll follow your example about like getting into the work. But first, let me back up and say I really appreciated Chev's like sort of grounding us in the political work that's happening in Florida, and also the shout out to Eatonville and like the history, and also just welcoming us to the space of folk that started us and grounded us. Thank you so much for your opening. So I got started in this work a long time ago, and it was people like Cy Khan and Kathy Howell and Kenneth Jones and Kamayu Masharia that like said, come on, we need young people. We need more young people out here. Come help us knock on these doors in the rural areas of South Carolina. And knocking on those doors was pretty interesting in terms of what we found out. Willie James was a young man that was 32 years old that got stopped during a routine traffic stop in 92 and by the police chief in North South Carolina. It's a small community called North South Carolina. And he was shot about 11 times, mostly in the back and in the head, and killed. And Willie James, bless his soul, was my sort of Trayvon Martin, my Mr. Floyd, my Breonna, my sort of entry into this work, and being dedicated on a different level. And so when I graduated from college, I was still working on these issues, still really passionate about it, still felt like my heart was here in community, bringing people together to really fight issues like what happened with Willie James and some of the other things that was happening in the rural areas. And so my heart was absolutely committed. And I think the people that was doing this work that I connected with early on, like Tamika, like Lavashton, like some of the folks that's on this call, I mean, their heart was in it. I think we formed relationships that have lasted decades, and relationship building is the foundation of our work. And in those relationships, they shouldn't be transactional. They should be transformative in a way that it does last for decades, if you're in this for movement building. And so the idea of heart is like putting your heart into the work, putting your heart into your connections that you make while doing the work. So that's one piece of it. I think that in terms of the mind, there is like these sort of bottom lines that you start to sort of formulate, these sort of like assumptions that you formulate in the work. And the assumptions are, hopefully you don't get jaded along the way, but you're pretty sure about these assumptions, and what you do and how you do it, equally important. That's the bottom line for me. What you do and how you do it is equally important. It's not good enough to do good work, but how you do that good work is just as important. I do this work from a framework of being an organizer. I was an organizer for years before consulting and working with foundations like the one that I now work for. But and that's how I got connected with Babcock Melanie. When I was a consultant, I was working as their sort of culture coach, helping their grantees with organizational culture. That was hilarious. But Babcock was really cool. And I did a lot of planning with organizations as well. But as an organizer, one of the things I learned is like, you have to do this work even if you're not organizing, with an organizing framework. People in communities know what their problems are. With resources, they can solve their own problems. And so that's the assumption that I have around sort of my organizing framework. And then the other is that, there's systems and there's structures, like Chev said earlier, that oppress people. They were designed to oppress people. And it doesn't need to be tweaked. These systems and structures don't need a little, help. They don't need people of color to represent that system. They fundamentally need to be changed. So, for me, those are like the mind pieces that I bring to every space that I'm in. And, in terms of scholarship, I think it was really easy to have Kenneth say, hey, sis, let me talk to you, and pull my coat on something, or, Sai to say, hey, Karima, let's think about the strategy a little differently, or Shell Trap to say, whatever. So I had a lot of folk, that would pull my coattail. I think as you get older in the movement, you have to be intentional about doing that. Have to be really intentional. And so for me, it's like learning and evaluating what I'm doing through new lens periodically, and also like having people around me that will call me to the carpet. And again, you have to be intentional about doing that, because if you're not, you can turn around and feel like you're doing a really good job and you are just, colluding. So I think those are the thoughts that I had around sort of habits of the heart, habits of the mind, and habits of scholarship. There's some specific questions around leadership styles and, how do we do it in a different way? So I'll get to those in a minute, but yeah, that's what I wanted to share. I'll pass it back to Chantel.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. I'm really enjoying this porch rocking with y'all. Karima, I've never met you in person, but it's fantastic to hear your thoughts here. And I think for me, the only thing I would add, coming into philanthropy 8 years ago, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I came from, community-based public health work, Southern organizing. For me, politicized at Highlander and Southerners on New Ground, doing faith-based organizing, so pro-queer work in the South. In North Carolina, before it was like cool to do that, so to speak, before anyone was funding anything. And so just learned a lot about regular people, and what does it mean to, like you're saying, Karima, kind of know that folks know what they need, and how do you not be a prescriptive person, or, I think, to be honest, philanthropy is like white supremacy culture on steroids, so to speak, so it's like, it's a real vortex of what is valued in philanthropy is so at odds with what we know community needs and wants. So how do we sit in these spaces and maintain our integrity, and I think that's a huge thing for me. I think when I first got my job, I was calling around to some, folks that I've known for a long time doing great work in the South. And I was like, tell me your funder who you think is doing a good job, or who's supporting your work well, because I come from like popular education and mostly rural health work and affordable housing work here in Durham. And I was never like gay for pay before my job. You know what I'm saying? I always just like did my organizing work wasn't my job, but I was working in public health. So anyway, so I call a couple folks that I know, and they kept giving me the name of a person who is actually on the Zoom. And I kept hearing this name, and I was like, cool, I got to talk to this person. And this person was Lavashton Glenn. I think, Karima, you just brought Lavashton into the Zoom, and I was like, okay, cool. I got to talk to this person. So I finally get a date to have a phone call with Lavashton, and I, again, really new and all the things and learning. And I remember I was in a rental car on a trip for work, and I sat in a parking lot in South Carolina and called Lavashton. And I was like, I'm so excited to talk with you. Like, I have my pen and paper ready to take notes. Like, tell me how you do what you do, and honestly, what she said was, Chantel, I try not to be an asshole. So I was like, I'm saying that word out loud. My mom would be upset but I'm not gonna say it again. But it just was so refreshing, honestly, to be like, oh, okay. And the time Lavashton was on the leadership team at GSP, and and I just think, I have just found it, like I said, just such a, okay, we can be real here. We can, I'm not performing. I mean, the performative orbits in philanthropy are very real and strong. And I think the sort of falsehoods and lying between funders and movement work is a whole thing. And like, I think, how do we be real and in honest communication about, the kinds of organizations we're trying to build, where resources are getting stuck. And I guess to use my own framework, the habits of heart, habits of mind, and habits of scholarship, like, to be leaders who aren't, mimicking, harmful practices, we have to be able to reflect about our own leadership and have, real relationships where people are going to be honest with us. Because when you work in philanthropy, everybody knows, you become more attractive, your jokes are funnier, all that stuff happens, and people are lying to you basically about things. And so how do you be grounded in reality? And I think it's really, for me, the grounding of like in longevity, decades of work, generations of work, knowing that my family is the result of, queer and trans Southern people's imaginations 30 years ago, so to speak. And how do I be honest about that? And the fact that when I was a young person in a small town in Louisiana, I couldn't imagine being out, being queer, being a white Southern person committed to racial justice. This sort of, and places like, saying Highlanders, Southerners Underground, other groups in Durham who've just been doing this work forever, helping to ground me. And I think that for me, in terms of, habits of mind, people have very strange ideas about the South. And I've worked with a lot of funders who either honestly believe that if they put the South on their 5-year plan, that it's going to be better in 5 years because of their time and attention. It's sort of an interest. It's like a while, and it took me a little while to be like, oh, you actually believe that, but for your time and attention to racism in the South. I'm like, so, that's like a whole thing. I had to get real about the kinds of, so for me, I feel like GSP has been one of those internal family huddles of problem solving, of like trying to make it work. And then there's an external, more strategic conversation of trying to organize money and people and resources and just being real about what do we understand about the institutions we sit in and what they can and can't do. And when we know what needs to happen that communities need, but our institutions aren't able to do them, how do we manage that? And what do we do? And so for me, the habits of scholarship, like how do we, buckle in somewhere and try some things out, with real, for me, the Southern Power Fund has been one, experiment and work that has been, decades and generations of thoughtfulness. Could the Contigo Fund in the wake of the Pulse massacre is another example of work, trying to, really respond and organize philanthropy in service to actual people and communities. And I think it really matters, once we get under the hood, the more of us who understand how this works, the more of us can do what needs to happen, particularly in the next 5 and 10 years. So for me, one of the things I'm kind of sitting with is like the next 5 and 10 years, how do I be most hopeful, with where I'm sitting, what I understand. And I'm excited about some of the experiments we'll be doing in the next 5 and 10 years to really walk out these very lofty commitments and ideas. So I felt a warm invitation, through my work with funders for LGBTQ issues, with GSP, from people who are real and honest. And I think that's, the sort of overarching, I think, invitation for all of us now is just to support one another in that. I think that's what I'll say. Yeah.
I was going to say, Chantel, the thing that was interesting, Lavashton was sort of like, I don't want to, she's humble, so I don't want to like put too much attention on her. But like, I remember when we were having the conversation about me going into philanthropy, working as a staff person. And I'm like, what? Let me think, like, let's see how this would work, because we needed more sort of folk with the organizing framework in these spaces. And I was like, but I need to be, be held accountable. Like I have to hold on to some kind of lifeline if I'm going to jump in that direction. And so that's what GSP has been for me. Like they've definitely been that lifeline, and like being on faculty with the Fellows for Southern Progress, I think has helped me to see how, we can all hold each other accountable as we do this work. And I mean, some people find your jokes funny. What was shocking to me, that there was so many people that were like, funders, pretty much suck, and you all need to give us the money and shut up. And I'm like, me? Who? What? Wait, I'm about to throw some organizing hands. Like what? Oh, trust space. Okay, my bad. Tell me that I suck. Okay. So that was interesting. So some people like, yeah, we're not having that at all about laughing at the jokes, and which is great. But there was the other extreme too, with like, you all are like carrying this torch of, well, anyway, I won't go down that road too far, but everybody doesn't laugh at my jokes. And I think the breakout rooms are ready, so I don't want to extend it too long, because I know we need to do the breakouts, but I love this conversation. I'm glad we're having it. So
I would love to just pull on one point, I think, thread that you mentioned, Chantel, but a role that GSP and this community has served for me is almost, I think it's a specific storytelling role. of always interrupting when we try to start the story at philanthropy, having resources to give. It always takes us back to like, where did those resources come from? And grounds us and roots us in the South in a way that centers, the communities, but also centers, right? The extraction, so that when we're telling the story about where resources should go, how they should move, then it is like very, very clear. This is not my money. This is not even our institution's money. And how do we redistribute and redisperse that in ways that actually the roots. And the other piece that feels really important is that this is a space that I feel like we can honor the complexity of problems that we're trying to solve and the nuance of the histories that have gotten us here. And so many other funder spaces, it's like, okay, we have this solution, it's on paper, and here, like the solution set is dynamic, and we're always growing, changing, and learning together.
Awesome. Well, we could have, more tea on the porch, but I think I'm going to do a little transparent Zoom check-in and check in with our tech folk and I'm asking about if we're ready to go into breakout rooms. And I think the instruction in your breakout room, talk about, your habits of mind, habits of heart, and habits of scholarship. How are you showing up to this work? How can this GSP network support you, in your work and in your development, to be honest and be real and to be of service, to Southern movement work over the next 5 and 10 years. So I'm not great with my computer, but I will look and see where we are. I'm going to play Jeopardy for a minute. So glad y'all are all here. Oh, here we go. I think people are hopping into groups. They're 20.
And we'll
Great.
make sure in a breakout room with folk.
Did we go?
Thanks,
too
Tamika.
long? Yeah, thanks, Tamika. Chantel, did we go a little bit too long, or we're good on time?
I think we're good. I think we're rolling. You know what I'm saying? We're rolling with. I appreciate what everybody had to say. I think it's great.
Great. And I'm so excited to be connected to you here, Karima.
And I think I'll hop in a group if you want it. I don't know how to get to them. Where do we go?
Yeah, if you're looking to where you.
I don't see how.
Tamika just went on mute for me. So I think
Yeah,
we're
so
going to have to be put there.
Yeah, so if you go in more, click on more at the bottom, you'll see a tab that says breakout rooms. Click on that tab and you'll see all the rooms that are available, and you can join whichever room you want. There are, yes.
So I think maybe because we're spotlit, I don't have that on mine. I don't know if you all have it. I think maybe if we remove the spotlighting, then we might be able to
remove your
get a
spotlight.
breakout. Okay.
All right, you're going to be placed into rooms.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mika.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have they all been placed in rooms? Yeah, just assign people. Go ahead. Felicia.
Yes.
Felicia, are you with us? Can you?
Did anybody else have that moment where that's like, did we have a report back? No one said anything about a report back. And then like, never mind.
Well, hi, everybody. I think we're coming back strong here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Is everybody back? Simone, give me a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for entertaining the framework that we are putting forward around habits of heart, habits of mind, and habits of scholarship. And just welcome to this convening, and may we take the next couple of days to learn and grow together. And I will allow Melanie and Karima to say any final words given what they heard in their small group conversations.
And I'll just say it was really wonderful to be able to hear the habits of heart that people have, so centered on connection and pausing to make sure that it's not just the go, go, go. And I just want to thank you, Chantel, for giving us this frame. And I hope that everyone carries this sweet and powerful framework with them throughout the week, but also into your work beyond.
Same. I think we had oh, that was thunder. Okay. I think we had a great group, all from the Carolinas. So that was pretty interesting. I mean, I think the framework helps us to think about how we kind of can look at our work in a way that helps us to bring our whole selves to the work in terms of our heart, in terms of our mind, in terms of our scholarship, and also hold ourselves accountable and make sure that we have people around us that do the same. But also make sure we stay true to the heart and why we're doing this work, and be really clear about sort of your values as you do the work. So that's what that brought up for me. I want to do a special shout out for any of the other fellows for Southern Progress faculty that might be on. Shout out to y'all and any of the fellows that came on. And also Amber and Elizabeth, who try to wrangle us all like herding cats. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out because everybody is working really hard to make this work and to better the region. Heising Simons, I think the foundation does good work. We try to make sure that we are lifting up BIPOC folk and lifting up the work that they're doing that really helps in this region. So yeah, I think thanks for the space. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to share. And I look forward to the rest of the conference. So yeah.
Back to you, Tamika.
Thank you all such for a very wonderful Southern style front porch conversation. And Chantel brought it home. She said, we got some more tea. And I was thinking, oh, are we having lemonade or tea? And when she brought it home, I was like, yeah, this is definitely a porch conversation. So y'all, I just wanted to highlight a few things about like the conversation was much needed and always needed. Being clear about why we do this work, that is so important. The intersectionalities of the South's complexities is real. I don't think people know what that looks like. Melanie when she was describing the shift and how we had to do that in real time. Imagine communities having to do that without resources or the abilities or somebody doing it for them. So when we have these conversations about philanthropic organizing in the South, we have to make sure that we understand what we're talking about and what that means. And when we talk about changing the narrative for long term, it requires long-term investments, not today, or we're just here because our strategic plan says that we're going to do that. But what about that? What about your strategic plan? What does it say about what happens to the folks after your strategic plan runs out? Or that program officer who's like, was familiar with the South, but they're gone now. What happens then? So I just want us to make sure that we are putting that in our hearts and understanding that why we do this work. And more importantly, the intersectionalities of the South's complexities. Because for me, I can tell you a whole lot of stuff, but I'll save a little bit for later. But again, thank you all for sharing. Chantel, Melanie, and Karima. This was very much needed to get us grounded and to help us foster as we go through the conversation. I just wanted to remind you all that we have some breakout sessions that are starting at 1 p.m. But right now we're going to break for lunch. And I need you all to enjoy that. And also, please interact on the app. It's good to see other folks from different areas catching up, and also participate in some of your state networking, because you don't know who you know and who you don't know. So please make sure you do that. And that's all I have. So enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you all back at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And for my folks in Alabama and other areas, Mississippi and everywhere else, 12 noon. So see you all then.